Garrett Edelstein here, your celeb expert and your Celeb Savant. Celeb Savant is a weekly entertainment show. We have long-form career retrospective type interviews with celebrities, singers, actors, and industry experts. Amy Studt has packed a lifetime of experience into a 20-year career in the music business. She's seen life from both sides of that glamorous and unpredictable world, first as a teenage pop star, then as a mature artist and as a collaborator with some of the biggest names in the business. Growing up in a musical family with a pianist mother and a violinist father, also a conductor, who worked with the Beatles, the Rolling Stones and Roy Orbison, Amy began writing music at the age of 8, teaching herself singing, piano, guitar and learning the oboe. By 12 years old, she had already recorded her first 2 demo albums, which would help her get signed at 14 to Polydor Universal, Sony BMG Publishing, and managed by Simon Fuller. Still in her mid-teens, she had a string of hits with her first record, False Smiles, being certified gold in the UK. Her highest charting single, Misfit, reaching number 6 in the UK, and Just a Little Girl reaching number 1 on Radio Play in the US. Amy released 2 further solo records, My Paper Made Men in 2009, under indie label 19 Entertainment, with singles Furniture and Chasing the Light, followed 10 years later by Happiest Girl in the Universe in 2019. Both albums received rave reviews across the board, the latter being awarded multiple 5-star ratings and getting Rough Trade's coveted Wall of Fame bestsellers list. Amy is currently prepping her 4th studio album between working with other artists and producers as a top-line writer all around the world. Up next on Celeb Savant, we've got Amy Studt. Where do we find you in the world? How are you doing and what's happening in your life?
I'm in the UK. I'm in Margate. I've been living here about nearly 10 years. Yeah. I'm good. I'm tired because I just had a baby. So I'm quite tired, but I'm also working again now, doing music again now. I took a bit of time out because I got postnatal depression, so I had to take a little break. But I'm out of that now and back in the game.
So Margate, is that like sort of a little town in the UK?
It's by the sea. Yeah. It's been a lot in the press, in the UK at least. I don't know anywhere else over the last 15 years or so, just because a sort of initially a small crowd of creatives moved to the area. Okay. I know that a lot of creatives are kind of from Margate. Like Tracy Emin is from Margate. So I heard whisperings of something going on down here. Just at a time when I just split from a partner I'd been with for a long time, and I was sick of London, and it was giving me a lot of anxiety, just the kind of energy of it, and I needed to see some sky and some sea and some nature. And so I heard about it, visited it about 2 days later, saw a for rent sign in a window in Old Town, which is the sort of main hub, or one of the main hubs now. But and 2 weeks later, I was living in Margate, but on my own. I didn't know a single person here, and sort of had to rebuild my life. And a year later, I met my now husband.
It's interesting because in South Africa, there's also a Margate, which is by the sea. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, I'm telling you. So that's why I was asking, because I was busy. I'm an EastEnders fanatic. I love EastEnders. And there was an episode where a couple of characters went to Margate, and I was like, surely they didn't come to South Africa. So that's why I was asking you about it, because it was an EastEnders and there's one in South Africa as well. So I just had to refine in my mind that there's one here and there.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy. No, I mean, it's gone through so many different transitions. If any Brits are listening to this, they're probably sick of hearing about Margate this, Margate that. When it was originally built up, it was very affluent area. So the buildings are beautiful. And then it went through a stage where it became extremely, very poor and very run down. And so it sort of has that. And then the properties were very, very cheap. So a lot of young Londoner creatives or independent good work from home Londoners and people from other places started moving and buying up property in the area to start families because they've been priced out of London. And so now there's like galleries everywhere and, you know, beautiful restaurants, and it's a lovely place to be. And now, to be honest, it's too busy for me. So we're thinking about moving. So
okay. So how far is Margate from London?
It's about an hour and a half on the train. If you're coming from East London, it's an hour and a half by car. If you're coming from West London, it's about 2 hours.
Now let's rewind. Let's
rewind.
Rewinding to your story in the entertainment industry. So at what age, whether it was a child, teenager, whatever it was, to realize, okay, cool, I'm good at this, I want to be part of it. And how did that journey flow into where we are today?
Okay, so I come from a musical family.
Okay.
My dad's quite a famous, well-known violinist and conductor, and my mum was the head of music at a school.
Okay.
So music was just something I grew up with. I don't remember a morning that I didn't wake up listening to my dad practicing on his Stradivarius violin and doing concerto parts. And I always loved music and I always loved acting. Those were the two things that I had the greatest passion, and writing as well. English, right? English. What do you call it? English lit.
Yeah. That's right.
So whenever I was asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" age 4 or 5, I'd be like, "I'm going to be maybe not the famous bit, but I'm going to be a songwriter, or I'm going to be an actress." Those were always my answers. Then about sort of even starting from a bit, I had this little cassette recorder that me and my friends, we used to make up songs. When I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. I've got like old recordings of this tiny little girl going like ba ba bida ba ba bida. And then I started seriously writing by about the age of 8. I was playing something at the piano, and my dad came in and he was like, "Have you thought about making up a melody to that?" And so I started making up a melody to it, and he was like, "Well, why don't you put some lyrics to that melody?" And so that was the beginning of me writing. And so by the age of about 12, I had about 40 songs that were completed that I thought were pretty good. And I used to get bullied a lot, so I used to kind of spend my break times and things like that just in the music room, just practicing. Basically, I got very sick with a bone-eating infection in my hip. Was the first time I got sick. My life has been very much kind of sick, well. As I was recovering from that and learning to walk again, my dad was like, "Oh, you know, why don't you go into this studio and record some of your songs and make an album?" Age 12, I made 2 demo albums of like 6 tracks each, and I started giving away and selling these albums. So business minded, but like selling albums to friends at school, and they would then play them to their parents, and their parents were like, "Oh, this kid at my daughter's school is writing these songs. Don't you think they're great?" And it was being passed around a lot, and it just happened to get passed to like the right person at the right moment. And they happened to have started the company 19 with Simon Fuller. If you don't know who Simon Fuller is, was the manager of the Spice Girls.
Yes.
What was the first Pop Idol? That's it. And, you know, even Annie Lennox and Amy Winehouse. And so, so that's the guy that heard it. And it just happened that at the time he was looking for a character for a TV show called I Dream, who was called Amy, from the south of England, which is where I was brought up, by the sea on the south of England, who wrote her own songs, who was kind of grungy and gothy, which I was. And that was the character he was searching for. So we got a random phone call out of the blue from this guy, Simon Fuller, which we thought was a joke. We thought, who is this? This isn't real. Like, And he was like, "Hey, I really like the songs. Could Amy maybe write a song for the TV program I Dream?" So I wrote this song called I Dream. And when he heard that, he was like, "Okay, I really want to meet Amy." So I went up to London, and suddenly I was like, you know, I mean, I had my hair in my face and a hoodie up, and I was incredibly intimidated because suddenly I was in this glitzy, shiny office building where all the women were like gorgeous and but like razor sharp minded, and
Yes.
I go into this room and meet this guy who to me is ancient because I'm a child basically.
Yes.
Whereas he's probably like my age now. And you know, there's awards everywhere, and he's talking to me about my music, and I'm like, you know, barely able to string a sentence together. He must have liked me, but he was like, hey, you know, do you want to go into the studio with this guy that we're working with called Yak Bondi and do some writing and see what you come up with? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I'll do it. So I did the studio session with the writing session with Yak, and we wrote 2 songs. One was called Kick for Me, and the other song was called Just a Little Girl. I was just turning 14, so
Okay.
I was like 13, just about to turn 14. When Simon heard Just a Little Girl, he was like, right, I want to sign Amy. And so suddenly, and these are the days when deals were big advances. Still, this is way before streaming, way before anything like that. So I got offered a 7-album deal.
Okay.
With a publishing deal with Sony BMG. I think a year later, there was like an additional recording deal with Polydor Universal. So overnight, my life changed. It was 6 different schools before I was 15, just because I was kind of like quite a troubled wild child. Lots of drug taking, lots of bad behavior, and lots of difficulties with mental health, which I didn't know at the time was because I was bipolar. So that wasn't discovered until my 20s. So when I was young, I was just a wild child. Suddenly my life kind of changed overnight, and I walked out of the last school that I was in. I just walked out the doors and I said I wasn't going to ever go back to that school. And I think because I didn't really fit into the mold of schooling systems, my parents kind of agreed to it. And so I went to a tutoring college just to finish my GCSEs. And that was like 2-3 days a week. And then the rest of the week and the weekend, I would travel up to London and stay with a good friend of mine, Catriona Drummond, who had been the woman who had started the company with Simon Fuller.
Okay.
And I worked with and I wrote with co-writers and got my experiences of writing in a studio environment. And that's how the album was made. And then in about 2002, my first single came out, which was Just a Little Girl. And I can't remember how that charted, but it was in the top 10, or might have been like 10 or 11 or something like that. And then the following year, Misfit came out in 2003, along with the album False Smiles, the first album. And the album, I think, went to 18 in the UK. It went gold in the UK. And the single went to 6 in the charts, I think. I mean, I remember turning up for my GCSEs in like this like blacked out limousine type car. Because my life was so different. Like suddenly I'd gone from this sort of like girl that no one really wanted to hang out with and kind of weird girl playing her songs, to suddenly like this very juxtapositioned life of like, one minute I'm doing these really fancy things that seem very big and very scary, and the next minute I've just got my normal life, and it's smaller and it's safe, and it's, you know. And I remember the only way that I was able to cope with the enormity of what was happening, like my first gig, for example, was in front of 20,000 people, and I was a kid, you know. I was like I'd just turned 15. So, and it was televised, and it was with a full orchestra, and I, you know, had barely had any time to rehearse with them. I think it was like an hour rehearsal with them. And even then I wanted to cut it short, because I felt like, you know, who am I to be taking up these amazing musicians' time? And also I was used to my dad's conducting style, which is very exact. And some conductors are very swoopy with their arms.
Okay.
And this conductor was very swoopy. So I didn't really know when I was supposed to be coming in when I was doing the piano track. So they didn't televise that version. They televised the one where I wasn't at the piano and I was just working with the mic and striking around the set stage, you know. And then my first TV was Top of the Pops, you know, and I was, and then it was Blue Peter, and then it was, you know, I was just working, and doing all this really big stuff. And people started recognizing me, and I didn't like it. I did not enjoy the fame side of things. It wasn't what I had gone into it for. I've fallen in love with writing music and being an artist and getting to express myself and the things that I was going through those mediums. And so I was very anxious and very much didn't enjoy the pressure. I guess I came across as if it didn't faze me, because I came across quite ballsy with quite a lot of attitude. But that was my way of covering up the terror that I felt. And also I had to kind of convince myself as if it wasn't happening. So, but what happens in those situations is it's like you put a lid on a pressure cooker, and at some point that thing is going to go off, right?
Yeah, explode.
Exactly.
Yes.
It didn't explode until my early 20s, when I'd written my second album, which was called My Paper Made Men. I have worked with some fabulous writers over the years, and I'm so grateful. I'm just so grateful for working with them. I learned so much, and I'm actually thinking at some point it would be really nice to put out an album of my really early recordings, those demo albums, because there's something about them. There's obviously something that Simon saw in them as well. Just this kid, right, the innocence of the writing.
Yes.
So I wrote and recorded my second album, and then I started to get quite sick. The drug taking was getting to the point where, and obviously this was all very hidden from the public. Simon was very good, and 19 was very good at protecting their artists. I was put through rigorous media training so that I wouldn't let slip, I went to this illegal rave, or I took drugs the other day, or any even smoking. I wasn't allowed, I smoked from the age of 13 till a few years ago, until I had a baby. I was trying to have a baby. Yeah, I was very well sort of insulated. Let's call it that. So people didn't really know that was going on, I don't think so. But it was getting to a point where my brain was really not coping with the stress. And I had an abortion and many partners that were cheating on me. It seemed to be that I was just picking guys that were cheating or sort of not treating me very well.
Yes.
And I, in turn, was not treating them probably very well either. But I was quite troubled, and then when I got to, I think I was 22, I had a nervous breakdown. And that's when it was literally like I had this elastic band in my brain that had got so tight that it just snapped. And all of a sudden I was hallucinating stuff. I always used to have audible hallucinations, but I just thought I was a genius.
What do you mean by that?
So it is actually a symptom of bipolar. It can be. Some people will hear voices, and thank God I don't. And thank God I don't get that. So I don't get people talking to me or things like that. I get instruments or melodies.
Oh, okay, I understand.
And sometimes it's underneath my eardrum, rattling, and I can physically feel my eardrum moving from the sound of it.
Oh my God, okay.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
And it often it sometimes happens to me now, just every now and then, before I go to sleep, where I'm somewhere, I'm sort of in a dream state.
Yes.
And then suddenly these trumpets will be like, and I'll jump. And at the time I was I'd be in a nightclub and I'd hear people singing. I'd be looking around for who the people were that were singing, and no one would be there. So when I was younger, I was just this is just, I'm just going to quickly record this on my dictaphone. I had a little dictaphone, and I'll use it in a song. Yeah. So when I got sick, when I had the breakdown, I started seeing things. So I would see a guy. At one point there was this guy running around my room. Every time I opened my eyes, he was in a different part of my room. I mean, it was really scary. And I just kept crying all the time, just bursting into tears and crying. And I didn't know why. I didn't know what was happening to me. I started getting terrible panic attacks, and I didn't even know what a panic attack was or felt like at the time. So I didn't even know it was a panic attack until my dad was like, it sounds like you're having panic attacks. And then there was a very tumultuous time of about 10 years where, you know, it got really, really bad. And it was bad, but I was writing about it.
Yes.
It was very strange because that's the thing that I was always turning to. I always had my lyric book or my book that I was writing my thoughts in, or writing short stories or poems or whatever in. And so I began documenting my experiences. Basically, at one point I tried to commit suicide.
Okay.
And sorry, this is so heavy. I know you.
No,
I know
it's
you're
fine.
like, I really like conversation.
No, that's fine. That's perfect.
But this
I
is my
appreciate
story.
your honesty. So thank you so much for your honesty. Yes,
I can only tell my story, and
that's perfect.
That's all I can do. So
that's perfect, and we love authentic stories. So that's perfect.
So yeah, so I had gotten to the point where I was literally skin and bones. I think I was like 6 or 7 stone in weight. And my forehead was covered in sores and stuff from me obsessively rubbing my forehead.
Yes.
Sit and sort of like just sit in one place all day long, smoking cigarettes by the back door. And anyway, I tried to take an overdose. I was taking like 3 times more than the lethal dose. But luckily for me, it was a medication that my body was already accustomed to, that had been prescribed to me. Okay. So at one point I did feel like the life in me was like coming out, seeping out of my body and floating up out of the door. The next day, I didn't know that at the time my partner had contacted my parents and had seen some of the things that I've been researching on the internet about how to, you know, and he was extremely worried. And so even though he didn't have a great relationship with my parents at the time, he contacted them and he was like, you need to come and get her now or she is not going to live. And so the next morning after I survived that experience, my mum just arrived and at my house, and she started packing a bag. And I mean, I was so beaten down and so kind of like just defeated that I was just watching her do it. And she just told me to get in the car, and I got in the car and she took me to a clinic, psychiatric and rehabilitation facility, and they had a piano. So I wrote the song Overdose. And they saved my life, as did many people that were close to me, saved my life and helped me get on the right medication. I was finally diagnosed. I worked through all of my previous trauma from a lot of the experiences in my life that we haven't even discussed. But yeah, I worked through a lot of stuff, and it was a 10-year process. And by the end of it, it got to about, was it 2018, 2019? And I realized that I basically had an album that was documenting, it was almost like a book, like an autobiography of 10 years of my life. So my boyfriend, partner, was also the guy I was writing with for a lot of it. And he was producing. So I would be too ill to do anything, and he would sort of almost pick me up and put me on the piano, because he knew that was the place that I could get my peace.
Yes.
And get things out of myself. And we worked together through thick and thin. And we realized that we had this album. So I ordered it in order of succession. I should say that by the end, you know, the last song on the album is called Happiest Girl in the Universe. And it's a happy end to the story, because I became well and happy and came through an extremely dark period of my life, but that you can, and that you learn so much from it, and that there is so much light that comes at the end of that tunnel. But even if the tunnel is telling you that there is never going to be light again. So I wrote probably the darkest album of all time, but it's also full of a lot of hope, and you know, because there's darkness in the light.
Yes.
And it's brutally honest. So then in 2019, I released Happiest Girl in the Universe on an indie label, and I bought the rights back for it. So it's now all mine. And I've now, skipping ahead, finished writing my 4th record, which is currently unnamed, and I'm about to start putting it out. And that's the end of that story. So there you go.
Wow. Such a beautiful story. And I'm so grateful that you came out to the end in the light, and sending you positive energy for the challenges that you've been through. And thank you so much for your honesty and sharing. And I'm sure it'll help a lot of the listeners who are going through challenging and dark times. So thank you again for your authenticity. From 0 to a 3 to 4 minute song, let's dive into your creative brain and creative mind. What is that process? Is it easy every time? I know a lot of it is motivated from the experiences that you've gone through and inspired by those stories, but is it a quick process? Is it easy? Let's dive into your creative world.
Okay. So sometimes it's easy. It can happen in 10 minutes, half an hour. Sometimes it's super easy. Sometimes I'll have a chorus for a year and I can't for the life of me get a verse or middle eight for it. Sometimes you'll get to a point and you hit a wall and you have to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing at that wall until you break it down. A lot of my best stuff is really when I'm just, I press record on my phone and I have like an hour where I will just sit and play whatever the hell comes out of my fingers and whatever the hell comes out of my mouth. And a lot of the time my words come out with my melody. So I'll just be ad-libbing. And ad-libbing is something that I've always been really quite good at. And I'm not talking about like doing like woo stuff. Like, I'm talking about like just coming out with stuff.
Yes,
off the cuff stuff. I much prefer working with other people because I love the social aspect of bouncing ideas around and going like, is this fucking crazy? Like, is this the stupidest thing that I've ever come out with? Yeah. Or is this pure brilliance?
Yes.
But I do think that there is something for me, like every time I go to write a song, I feel like it's not going to be good. It's something that I've never been able to remove because for me, like it's where, and maybe it's the same with painting, maybe it's the same with all other creative things. And I'm not talking about God because I don't believe in God. Totally fine if anyone else does, but yes. But when I think about magic, that's where real magic for me lies. Mm-hmm. It's like something is coming from somewhere and passed through you. It's hitting your heart center and then it's coming out of you. I don't feel like it almost comes from me. I feel like I'm a filter. Every time I go to write, I have that fear that I'm going to write something terrible. But then I remind myself the practical side of it, which is 10 terrible ideas will often lead to one brilliant one. Yeah. So you got to be prepared to make as many mistakes as possible, in quotation marks, mistakes.
Yes.
Not be scared for it to be shit, basically.
Yeah, totally.
But I am always worried that the magic will disappear and that it will never come to me again.
I'm with you. Amy, once we finish this conversation, and I recognize if I had to ask you this question in 2 days, 2 hours, 2 months, I know your answer will be different every time. But once you finish this conversation and you had to push play to 5 songs by other artists, what would those songs be and by whom?
Oh, God. Okay. So, so Joanna by Scott Walker. When Doves Cry by Quindon Tarver by Quindon Tarver from the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack. Obviously that's Prince's song, but it's his version that I would listen to. This Bitter Earth on the Nature of Daylight by Dina Washington and Max Richter on the Blue Notebooks album. The Wind by Cat Stevens and Ode to Divorce by Regina Spektor. But I have an additional one.
Okay.
That's like a sort of swappy one. Anyone Else But You by Moldy Peaches.
As a final message to the listening audience, what would you like to say?
Just that I know some of the stuff that I've talked about can be quite heavy. What my dad always used to say to me, always used to help me, that it will all be all right in the end. And if it's not yet all right, then it's not yet the end, is what I would like to say.